What's up, fellas? We're going to build a computer today.
Here's the lowdown on all the parts that we've got here. We've got a Corsair Carbide Series 100R mid-tower case, an Intel Core i5 8600K processor, an MSI Pro Series Z370 Pro motherboard. For RAM, we've got a Corsair Vengeance LPX 16GB DDR4 RAM at 3000 MHz, Silicon Power 256GB SSD with 3D NAND, Western Digital Blue 1TB SATA hard drive. For the power supply, we've got an EVGA 500W B1 80 Plus power supply, Cooler Master Hyper T12 Evo CPU cooler, and an LG CD DVD writer. And as always, all of these parts are listed in the video description below, where you can check them out or purchase them on Amazon. Alright, let's get started.
Alright, so first thing you're going to want to do is unpack your case, and be very careful when you're doing this, especially if you have the acrylic side panel on your case. You don't want to scratch this, and I can't stress this enough. Do not remove the plastic until you've completed your build. Once you've got your case unpacked, you're going to want to remove the side panels on it. There are 2 screws on the back on each side, so there's 2 on this side and 2 here. A lot of times you can just remove them with your thumb, especially if you have thumb screws. If not, just use a Phillips head screwdriver. So we're going to remove these first. Place the screws somewhere that you're not going to lose them. Then go ahead and remove the first side panel. Again, place this somewhere that it's not going to get damaged. Then do the same for the other side. Now that you've got both side panels removed, you're going to want to remove the second hard drive tray. Here you're going to find a box. This is where all of your extra hardware and other parts for this case is going to be. So you want to very gently pull this apart. Then you have your box. Open it up. Inside you're going to see some zip ties, motherboard screws, and various other tools, including looks like some fan screws in there for the front panel fans, among other things. Go ahead and put this aside. Don't lose it. So now that we've got our case apart, you can see where the motherboard is going to go on the inside. Now, before you put the motherboard in, we're going to go through a few steps. First of all, there's an I/O shield that's included with your motherboard. Make that the first thing on your list to put in this computer. Secondly, you're going to want to pre-assemble your motherboard before you install it. It's going to make it so much easier to put the CPU in, your RAM, and potentially your cooling system before you install it into the computer. So let's move this out of the way. We're going to go ahead and assemble our MSI Z370 PC Pro motherboard. First thing you're going to find in the box is the motherboard. Keep it in this wrap until you're ready to put it together. You're going to get your drivers and utilities disc. Some other information in here. Quick installation guide. If you're watching this video, you're not probably going to need this, but it's nice to have on hand. Owner's manual and user guide. The biggest thing this is useful for is telling you where the power header, or what the pins are for your power header. Get a couple of SATA cables in here. Notice that one of them is a right angle SATA cable. And the thing we talked about first, the I/O shield. Put this in the computer first. I'll say it again. Put this in the computer first. Do not forget this. Okay, so we're going to set this aside for now. We don't need that at this very moment. What we need is our I/O shield. Very first thing. So we're going to grab our case. Going to pull apart the I/O shield packaging. Now sometimes you might get these and they are a little bent up. Namely, you see that one right there for the Ethernet port? It's a little bent. We're going to bend it up just so that we can fit the motherboard in there. I don't know why that was bent from the factory, but it happens. So right now we're looking inside the case near the back. This is where the I/O shield's gonna go. So we're gonna take the side that's beveled out and put that in bottom first. Press it in. May take some force. Careful not to cut yourself. These things are sharp. So you're gonna go all the way around, just like so. Make sure that the edge is all the way through. Now you have successfully installed your I/O shield. Now that we've got the I/O shield installed, we can move this out of the way and start working on the motherboard. Now, when you're working on high-end electronics, especially motherboards, be very freaking careful. Don't drop it, don't work on it while you're on carpet, and just don't be an idiot. These things aren't cheap, and trust me, if you mess one up, they're not gonna give you a warranty replacement on it. So, just warning you, be careful. I like to use the anti-static bag to go below the motherboard while I'm working on it, between the board and the surface, just for safety's sake. So, we're gonna turn this over. Open the board. And very carefully remove it from the packaging. Now we've got our motherboard here, and we're ready to go ahead and put our CPU in first thing. So in this build, we're going to be using an Intel Core i5 8th generation processor. This is the i5 8600K. So we're going to open this up. Be gentle with this. Now notice, Intel processors don't have any pins on them. Thank God. I'm glad those days are over with at AMD. Not saying AMDs are bad, I just hate using pins. So I'm going to carefully open this up. Always hold the chip by its edges. Don't ever touch the electrical contacts on the bottom. So now we're going to remove this. There's a little tab right there that says remove. Very, very carefully pull up on this with your fingers and then lift it away. And for the love of God and all that is good, do not touch those pins in that socket. If you bend even one, your motherboard will be rendered completely useless, and I guarantee you won't get a warranty replacement and you cannot return it. It's yours and you've got to buy another one. So be very gentle when you're doing this. So we're going to pull this little bar very gently over to the side and lift up. You're going to notice this whole piece comes up. We're going to take our CPU chip out very carefully. If you look on the bottom, you can tell there's kind of a rectangle design there. There's also two notches, one there and one on the other side. In the socket, there's a notch on the left and a notch on the right. These two notches are always going to go up on the upside. So we're going to very carefully drop this in there. Oh, this is nerve-wracking. Every time I've done so many of these, it always bothers me. Just make sure that it's properly seated and doesn't move around. And then we're going to carefully drop that back down. This is going to take some force. Go over and under that little pin. And there you go. Now your CPU chip is successfully installed. And we didn't bend any pins in the process. Also in the box, you're going to notice that it came with one of these nice little stickers. Hold on to it. You might want to be proud that you've got an Intel chip in there. I don't know, kind of like a Ford versus Chevrolet disagreement. Intel versus AMD, I don't know, that's up to you. All right, next thing that we're gonna do, we're gonna install our DDR4 memory into the DDR4 slots. So for memory, we're gonna be using Corsair Vengeance LPX DDR4 RAM. It's 3000 megahertz, and we've got two 8GB sticks inside. That totals up to 16 gigabytes of RAM. This is another thing that you're going to want to be very careful with. So we're going to grab our knife, very carefully go along the top here without cutting ourselves. Now you don't have to be as careful as the processor chip when you're installing this. Just don't touch the gold contacts on there. The oil on your skin over time will degrade the usefulness of those contacts, and you will probably run into issues in the future. So just don't touch those. So I'm going to very carefully remove the packaging. Now notice here on the motherboard where it says DIMM A1, DIMM A2, DIMM B1, and DIMM B2. And there's a little colon over the side that says DIMM A2 and DIMM B2 first. That means you're going to want to put your two first RAM sticks in the second and the fourth slot from the left. So we're going to go ahead and install our first stick of memory in here. Notice the notch right there. DDR4 is a little more difficult to figure out the orientation for, so I'm going to help you out a little bit here. DDR4 is always going to have the notch a little further down from the middle. So here we're going to push back these two pieces and these two clips. So we're going to install our memory in here in the slot just like so. You're going to take some force, push it down till you hear 2 clicks. And we're going to do the exact same thing for the other one here. 2 clicks. Make sure that it's both properly seated. And there you go. You've just installed DDR4 RAM. All right, now that we've got that out of the way, you've got your motherboard just about set up and ready to put in your tower. Now, if you're not using a liquid cooling system, it's up to you whether you want to go ahead and put in your cooling solution now. If you're using a liquid cooling system, wait until you get the board in your tower first and then install your liquid cooling system. So for this build, we're not using liquid cooling. We're just going to be using your standard Cooler Master Hyper T12 Evo. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and install this motherboard in the tower, and then we're going to install our cooling solution. Okay, before we install the motherboard in this tower, let's go ahead and locate our motherboard screws, which is in this pack right here. So let's go ahead and get that open. Now there's a few different kinds of screws here. I'm gonna go through each set for you. This is for your cooling fans on the back of the system or on the front, depending on how you want to screw these in. You probably won't have to use these unless you purchased extra cooling fans for your tower. These right here are going to be your hard drive or SSD screws. Those are going to go in the hard drive trays here, only if you're going to be using a 2.5-inch hard drive or SSD in your system, which in this case, we're going to be using both an SSD and a full-size hard drive. These won't fit full-size hard drives, just the smaller ones. These screws right here are going to be for your CD drive. And yes, we are going to be installing CD drive in this build. These are the screws you would use in the front of your system if you were going to be installing extra fans in the front. And these right here are going to be your motherboard screws. Notice how much smaller they are than the rest of them. So that's what we're going to be using for the motherboard. And you also get an extra standoff. So you might want to check your motherboard and see if you have all the standoffs installed in here. If not, there's your extra. You're going to want to go ahead and put that in and make sure to put it in the correct slot so you do not short out your board. So at this time, I'm going to go ahead and put the board in to confirm whether or not I need that standoff in there. First thing you want to do is move any additional wires out of the way for pre-installed fans. The wiring, it's over here. Just get it out of the way so it doesn't get in your way. Now when you put the board in, be very careful about that I/O shield that we talked about earlier. Make sure that you get everything lined up correctly and that you don't bend any metal pieces. Perfect, so I got my motherboard installed and it looks like I don't need this standoff, so great. Essentially, if you got this board and this case, you don't have to worry about using this standoff. Now from what I was talking about earlier, where I said make sure that none of the pieces of metal from your I/O shield get stuck, compare your I/O shield to mine. Make sure there's no pieces of metal blocking any of the ports. If you have anything blocking any of the ports, pull the board out and try it again and make sure that next time you have no pieces of metal from that I/O shield blocking any of your ports. It should look exactly like this. Okay, now that you've confirmed that your motherboard is installed correctly and you're happy with your results, grab yourself a Phillips head screwdriver and your motherboard screws that we talked about earlier, and let's go ahead and get that board secured down. So we're gonna pull all these out. Now here's a tip. When you put your screws in, you don't have to go full hung-ho tightening them down. Don't over tighten them, you can break the board. Just make sure that they're tight enough that the board is not going to move around easily, especially if you plan on installing a graphics card in your system. So this case is actually really nice and has one of the standoffs that actually sticks through one of the screw holes in the motherboard to help align it and keep it in place. So that way you don't have to hold the motherboard in a strange, awkward position just to get the screws in. So look for each hole that looks like this, has a series of dots on it, and we're gonna put a screw in each one. Also, there's 3 at the top. Don't forget those. Alright, it appears that we've got all of our screws installed. It's perfectly normal to have a couple of leftover screws once you do this. So we just want to confirm that we've not missed any screws on here. Doesn't look like we have. We have one here, there, another one here beside your audio jacks, another one up here on the top left corner, top middle, and top right. So now that we've got everything installed, the board is secure, it's not going anywhere, and we're good to go. Now we can go ahead and start connecting our fans, and then we're going to put our thermal solution on. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and connect the rear fan. So I'm going to undo this twist tie right here. Now you can make your case look as pretty or as janky as you want, but I am incredibly OCD about stuff like this. So I'm going to take all my excess wire and look and see if I can find a spot that I can hide it, which, to be perfectly honest with you, I don't. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go around the top here, kind of behind the board. Then I'm going to take my excess, go through this side, and then loop back up. We're going to plug this into this port right here, system fan 3, and there we go. And that just looks better for wire management, so that way we don't have a lot of wires just hanging around. And I'm going to secure these later. So at this point, it's pretty safe for us to go ahead and remove the zip tie on the back here to detach all these wires right here. Pretty large twist tie on there. Then we're just going to pull all those on the other side of the case where we can do our wire management. Alright, so I'm going to turn the case around now. You can see all of our cables on the back that connect to our I/O ports on the front, our power and reset button, and power LED and hard drive indicator. So we're going to take all of those cables. We're going to very nicely situate them right here, since that's where they're going to connect. Of course, you're going to want to manage them best you can, especially since you've got a window on this case. You want them to be pretty. This is our USB 3.0 front panel connector. We're going to put that through this slot. And then this is the connector for our audio front panel connectors. Now at this point, we're going to connect our USB 3.0 front panel connector to JUSB 1 on the motherboard. There's a little tab at the very top that you'll want to line it up with an opening on the port. Very carefully install this. Trust me, it will break. Then just very carefully push your excess wire to the back. Connect our HD audio or front panel audio connector to this area right here on the board that says JAUD1. You want to manage that accordingly best you can. And then here are the front panel connectors for your reset switch, power switch, HDD LED, and power LED. You may have to consult your manual depending on what you're building to connect these in. Fortunately, the motherboard right here tells us exactly where they all go. It's going to be very difficult for me to show you in the video where these connect because I've got to figure it out myself also. So just be sure to consult your manual for this. I promise you'll be able to find it very easily in there. Now that we've got our front panel connections finally connected, we're going to pull the slack out to the back of the case, being very careful doing so. And now we're going to flip the case around and you will see where your excess wiring is. And that's okay, we'll take care of that in the future. Next thing we're going to install is our 500 watt EVGA power supply. This is probably going to be one of the easier parts of the build, minus the fact that you've got now a lot more wires to manage. So let's go ahead and open it up. Now, on the inside of the box, I'm going to be able to open it up, find the user guide, your power cable that connects from your computer to your wall outlet, all the cables, and of course, the power supply itself. This is the free power supply tester that they send you. you know, it's useful in some instances, especially if you have building a gaming computer that needs 2 power supplies. All it does is keeps the power supply on all the time. Also in that package, you're going to find your black power supply mounting screws. You're going to want those, so hold on to that. Now for this build, we're going to be using the EVGA 500B bronze power supply. It's 80 plus bronze. You got all your connection that you need over here. So there's your motherboard connector here. 2 CPU 4-pin power connectors, SATA connectors. Got another set of 3 SATA connectors. You've got a set of 3 Molex connectors and a floppy power cable. Who uses those anymore? And yes, I was correct. There are 2 8-pin graphics card connectors. So if you got a GPU like a 1070 or 1080 or 1080 Ti that requires having 2 sets of 8-pin power connectors, you're golden with this. However, if you got a 1080 or 1080 Ti, get a 750 watt or higher power supply. Don't get the 500. Alright, so now we're going to go ahead and mount our power supply. Notice there is a fan on the bottom of it. You're going to want to have this fan facing towards the bottom of your computer build. There is a nice little piece of protective film on here. You can keep that on or remove it, but I always remove them just because, wow, this is actually kind of difficult to remove. My goodness, usually they're a lot easier to get off than this. Come on. There we go. So we're gonna mount this fan facing down in the computer. Make sure you don't get any cables caught in the way. And then it just slides all the way to the back. And you remember those screws I talked about earlier? Now you're going to need them. All right, so it's just 4 of your normal plain Jane Phillips screws that you'll use in a computer. So we're gonna go ahead and put all 4 of those in. Okay, now you see that hole right here in the back, right there? We're gonna take all of our cables and we're gonna put them one by one through that hole. That's how we're going to manage our cabling very easily. All right, now we've got all of our cables through that hole. We're going to go ahead and route them through each hole that we need to for them to come out and look nice. So we're going to want to grab our motherboard connector, and I'm going to come through this hole right here. You're going to want to make sure that you align these extra 4 pins correctly. There's a nice little notch on the back there. Hold that all together very carefully. Plug that in. Oh, might help if I put it in the correct direction. So the extra 4 pins go towards the top. All right, and you're going to want to push that in with some considerable force, and then route your cables back to where they look nice, just like so. Next up is our 4-pin CPU power cable. We're going to route that through the top here. I'm sorry, dual 4-pin CPU power cable. I unfortunately don't have a lot of room to work with in this case, so I'm gonna have to just go across the top and make it look as good as I can. These are another one similar to the motherboard connector that you've got to get just right, paired together, plug in, and then we're going to rotate these back and manage them along the top best that we can. Okay, so I actually forgot to do something. I forgot to put the CD drive in earlier. So I'm going to remove the front panel on this very carefully so that things don't go flying. And this is what the front panel looks like. So we're going to remove this cutout. Just flip it over, press these 2 tabs together, and it literally falls out. It's that easy. You can't screw this up. Now what I'm going to do is reinstall the front panel cover carefully. It just snaps right back in. Now what I love about this case is how easily you can install a CD drive or devices in the front panel. You see this right here? This is a clip. You can pull this back or push it in and remove or insert whatever you need to in the front. So all you have to do is slide this in and it snaps in place. It's not going anywhere. This is not going anywhere at all. So you don't need to screw anything in there. Installation is that simple. All right, now I'm gonna take one set of my SATA connectors and I'm going to run it through the very top port, and I'm going to plug that into the corresponding connector on the optical drive, and then push my excess wire back through, out of the way. Now I'm going to grab my SATA cables, and I'm going to remove one from the package. And actually, the one that I'm going to get out of here is the one that doesn't have the right angle on it. Now, I had mentioned this earlier. There is a cable that has both straight connections, and there is one that has a right angle connection on it. We're going to save the right angle one for our hard drive and SSD here shortly. So I'm going to use this one for the optical drive. I'm going to want to straighten it out. I'm going to insert this into the back top slot, plug it into the corresponding SATA port, and I'm going to very nicely come down the back and manage my cables accordingly. I'm going to find the corresponding SATA port here. We're going to plug this into SATA port 1. Our excess cable is going to be in the back, out of the way. And I'm actually going to go ahead and connect my second cable also. So I'm going to route it through, and I'm going to plug it just above the one that we just plugged our CD drive into. So this would be SATA port 2. Push it till it clicks. We're going to manage the wiring on this accordingly. And we're just going to kind of feed this through that slot. Now, at this point, we probably need to go ahead and install our cooling solution, which is the Cooler Master Hyper 212 Evo. So we're going to go ahead and pull this out of the box. Very nice packaging here, actually. So these are going to be our parts that we're going to use to mount our cooling solution on with. You have this bracket here that holds the heatsink down to the chip. You get some what appear to be screw covers. I can't really tell what those are. I don't think I've ever had to use those. And these are clips if you want to install a second fan on the back of the 212 Evo. There's already one installed on there. And then of course in this pack, you're going to get thermal paste. You're going to get a tool that's going to help you install these nuts on the back, and you get two different kinds because one is for AMD processors and the other one is for Intel processors. We're going to set that aside. Be sure to refer to the included user manual so that you can figure out which screws and which bolts and yada yada that you need, and this will tell you exactly how to mount this system. So now we're going to pull out the heatsink very carefully. Wow, that looks pretty. I haven't actually installed one of these in quite some time. A lot of my customers prefer liquid cooling systems for their gaming builds, but this is a budget build for customers just using it for a work PC. Very nice. Be careful handling it and be sure not to bend any of the fins on the heatsink here. On the bottom, you're going to be able to see something that says here, please peel off label before you use it. So we're going to wait to peel this off until I get ready to put it on. Here's your cable that you will use to connect to the CPU fan header on the motherboard. So we're going to set this aside for now. On the back of this, you're going to see the back plate that I believe we're going to use for this. I need to check the manual first and just make sure. So let's see. So inside the user manual, you're going to see instructions for each kind of socket that you're going to be dealing with. Intel AMD, this is for the LGA 2066, various model numbers on there. This is actually, I believe, the one that we're going to be using. If you look on the side of your processor box on here, it actually tells you the socket right there, LGA 1151 or 1151, however you want to say it. Right here on number 3, you see LGA 1151. So it looks like we're going to be using this back plate. Now for these right here, those little notches right there, what that means is we're going to be using this notch right here. All right, you see how it looks like you can move this? You pull down on it and then you can actually move it around. So it says that we need to put it on that one right there, the center one. So you need to do it for each one. Ah, that one's already on the center. We're going to pull that down, scoot it over, pull that down, move it to the middle. There we go. So now this is set up for a LGA 1151. Now this pin in the center, the way this works, I don't know how well you can see this, but right under there's a little hole. You're gonna have to push this together, slide it in like so, best that you can, may take a little maneuvering, and then you will want to make sure that that little pin on the bottom that's sticking out sits right in the middle, right there. And from there, you can scissor it out and then mount it however you need to. Okay, I'm sorry folks that I couldn't film that part. It was really not a pain in the butt to put in, but more of a pain in the butt to film me putting that in. So had to move the computer around a lot and just hard to keep up with single guy running a camera. So please excuse that. I've got that in now. So the back plate is in and I have these 4 mounting posts in. If you read that manual that comes with it, it tells you exactly how to do it. Now, we are going to go from the top view here and I'm going to show you how to install the heatsink now. First thing you're going to want to do, pry your fingernail underneath these 2 little tabs just on one side and carefully remove the fan for now. Set it aside, we're just about to put it back on. So you want to get this little scissor aligned correctly with the hole that we talked about earlier. Get that together and then very carefully make sure that you've got it scissored out correctly. Alright, now here's the point where we're going to firstly remove this little label. Be careful not to touch that now. I'm going to set that right there. Grab your thermal paste. We're about to put that on. So now that you got your thermal paste, we're just going to put on basically the size of a grain of rice or a pea on here. So go ahead and squeeze some of that out. And that actually is perfect. Just kind of dab any extra excess that you get off of that somewhere else on that CPU chip nearby. Don't put too much on it. You don't want it to just ooze out all over the place. And then retain the cap, put it back on. Hold on to this, you might need it later. Now, I'm going to grab my heat sink and we're going to hold that whole assembly together very carefully. And now I'm going to carefully place this on top of the CPU. And while I'm doing so, kind of holding it, going ahead and starting 1 or 2 of the screws. Go ahead and get those in there. Now you'll want to get your Phillips head screwdriver once again, and then very carefully put some pressure on this to press down on top of that and screw in the corner. You'll want to go in a zigzag pattern, so you'll want to do, just for example, you don't have to follow this exactly, but this corner, that corner, this corner, that corner. That is the proper way to mount one of these. That way it puts even pressure on the CPU chip. Put that in. Alright, so now this one and this one is tight. We're going to very carefully push that one down and get it started. Really helps to put your fingers on that, because if your screwdriver slips, you're in for a world of trouble if you knock a component off the motherboard. So I'm going to get that all the way down. I'm going to get this one all the way down. Alright, now just make sure that it's tight and it moves just a little bit. It's normal for it to move just a hair. Grab your fan and pay close attention to the arrows on the very top. The arrow pointing this direction indicates which way the fan is blowing air, which will always be from the bare side in. And then this arrow indicates which way the fan is spinning, which would be to the left. Just for aesthetics sake, I'm going to remove this label. Don't remove that one, it voids your warranty. I'm just removing this big ugly yellow one. So now we're going to put this back on and very carefully snap it back in place. There we go. And again, pay attention to the arrow. You always want the air to move from the front of the computer all the way through out the back. You want to orient all your fans the same direction, and that's how we're doing this. So now we're going to take our fan cable that we've got here, and now we are going to plug it into, oh, that's in a terrible spot. Actually, for this build, let me pull this back off. I'm going to plug this in first. Right, so we're going to plug our fan in right here where it says CPU fan 1. Put our wiring just right there out of the way. And then carefully put that back on. Boom. Now your CPU cooling system is installed. You've got your fan connected and installed properly. Now we are ready to install our SSD and hard drive. First, what we're going to do is we're going to remove the first 2 hard drive trays from our case. I don't know how that got wrapped up in there. We're going to remove both of these. And these are your hard drive trays. That's exactly what they look like. You got some holes in the bottom for your screws. Now, you remember earlier where I talked about the case included some hard drive screws? Let's go grab those now. And the ones that you're going to need are going to be these tiny beveled screws right there. You notice how some of them have a little bit of a curve to the top and they're flat? Those are the ones that we want. In this model, for the larger hard drives, you actually don't need any screws to install them. See right here in the sides where there's pins all along them, on both sides? Hard drive installation is literally this easy. So, we're going to orient the hard drive to where the ports will face out the back of the case where your cable management is. You're going to take and line them up with the 2 holes right here. We're going to slip that on, pull this apart on this side just a little bit, and they snap. Boom. It's installed. Now, we're going to set that aside just for a moment. We're going to remove our SSD. For this build, we've got a Silicon Power 855 256 gig SSD. I have a link in the description where you can purchase one of these. Has a 3-year warranty. I actually had really good luck with these. Being an off-brand, better known as not a Western Digital or not a Corsair or a Kingston or whatever else, SanDisk. Not saying they're not good brands, it's just cheaper alternatives sometimes. So we're going to pull this out. Now this is where you're going to need the screws. If you notice on the bottom of this, there are 4 screw holes. If you notice on the bottom of the SSD, there are 4 screw holes. We are going to get our beveled screws. I'm going to get 4 out of the bag, and I'm going to go ahead and just put one in that hole right there. And I'm going to try to line the SSD up with the first one. I'm going to get our Phillips head screwdriver and just start the screw on the first one. All right, and don't tighten that completely just yet. We're going to put our second screw in. Now we can tighten it. We're going to put our third. And fourth screw in. Well, if I can hold on to it. There we go. Now we can move all this out of the way. We don't need any more hard drive screws at this time. I'm going to get our case back over here. And the way I like to orient these is I like to put the hard drives on the lower slots and the SSD on the very top. I'm going to pull this cable back out for a second. SSD is going to be the very top one. Now we're going to slide our case around. I'm going to take this connector right here. I'm actually going to connect this one to the SSD. And I'm actually short one drive cable. So let me go grab another one of those. All right, now I've got another right angle SATA cable. We're going to plug that into the actual hard drive. We're going to plug that into SATA number 5. We're going to come back here and get our other SATA cables, and we're going to plug them into our storage devices. So I'm going to plug the first one into the SSD. The second one into the hard drive, and the third one we're just gonna let hang down there for future use. Okay guys, if you've gotten this far, you've almost got a functioning computer. So now all I've got left is some wire management, and I'm not gonna show you detailed video on how to do that because honestly, wire management's boring, and you know what's best for your system. Just make sure that you don't leave anything sticking out, and that you secure all your cables using the included zip ties along these channels right here. And if you have to, wrap some extra cable up under here. Even if you have to remove some of those drive sleds, it's okay, no problem at all to do that. All right, cable management and everything's done. Not the prettiest on the back side, but what does it matter? You're not gonna see that. What matters is what's on this side. Look how beautiful that looks. You don't really see many cables at all, except for these right here. I had no choice but to put those over there. That's the excess cables for the 4-pin Molex and the additional SATA cable and the graphics card power cables. We're not putting a graphics card in this computer since it's a workstation computer. We don't have to worry about those. But look how beautiful it looks. All it takes is a little bit of time, 10-15 minutes, and you can make your case look just as good as this. Now it's time to go ahead and put the cover panels back on. So we're gonna get the blank one for this side. And you're probably gonna need to move your cables around just a hair to get these to fit, and that's okay. We're gonna just try to organize these best that we can. I left some slack just for serviceability in the future, so that if I have to change anything out or a motherboard goes bad or God forbid what, you know, we got a little bit of slack and it's not gonna be as much of a pain in the butt to do any maintenance or service on it. So I'm gonna pull these out of the way. I'm gonna push that over. I'm gonna put this plate back on. May require a little bit of pressure down here. You just want to make sure that you get it even on all sides. I'm going to have to do something different with this. And like I said, it's going to take a little finagling probably for you to be able to get this just right. And again, that's okay. Just as long as you can get this to where it's totally sealed. Vacuum will require you use both arms to push down and slide at the same time. And what do you know? Got on the first try, perfectly smooth. Look at that, beautiful. Now, before we do anything, let's put these two screws back in on this side of the cover panel, just so that it doesn't slide off on us. There we go, that's sealed up. And I'll get a microfiber cloth and take those little smudges off of there. Now that we've got all that together, I'm gonna go ahead and put this side panel on. And since this build is for a customer, I'm not going to remove the plastic here myself. I'm gonna let my customer do that. Missing a little bit there. Make sure you get that on perfectly smooth and flat. Beautiful, just what I'm looking for. All right, grab your case screws. Absolutely wonderful. We've got a nice computer built now, and well, it's time to install Windows or your operating system of choice.
Now this is the part everyone gets nervous about, so let's go ahead and start up our system for the first time and see if it works. And it does. Now if you see this, just hit F1. It means you did everything right. So go ahead and let it boot up. Make sure you've already got your operating system disk or USB drive installed. And we're going to start that up. Now this has been sped up obviously, so just go through the motions here and hit install now. Now this portion is where you'll enter your product key. If you've got that already on hand, you can go ahead and enter it now. I'm not going to do it just yet because I'm still just testing this, and we're going to wait until the customer actually purchases the license. So I'm going to hit I don't have a product key. That'll let you continue. We're going to install Windows 10 Pro in this instance. We're going to accept the terms and conditions mumbo jumbo. Now here we're going to select custom, install Windows only. Now you'll want to select the SSD, which is this drive 0 for 238.5 gigs. And we're just going to click next to that after we select that. Now this has obviously been sped up because I'm sure you don't want to have to sit here and wait 20-30 minutes for Windows 10 to install. So yeah, this is the fastest Windows 10's ever been installed. Alright, so now when you get to this screen, obviously you're going to select which region you're in or what country. So we're in the United States, so we're going to hit yes to that. And then you're going to select your keyboard layout. And if you want to add a second keyboard, which we're not in this case, so we're going to hit skip. Now it's going to check for updates. And I'll be honest, this is the fastest that this thing has ever checked for updates. This is real time. I haven't sped this up. So that's finishing it up, and it says we're apparently up to date. Now in this instance, we're going to set this up for personal use. So we're going to select the first option up here and then click next. And then for this instance, we're going to use an offline account. That way you don't have to deal with the Microsoft account crap. So we're going to click offline account. And then it's going to say, are you sure that you don't want to use the Microsoft account? Yeah, we're sure. So we're going to click no. Now you're going to put in the name of the first user that you're going to have on this account. And then you'll want to select a password. And you don't have to put one in. I didn't. It's going to ask if you want to use Cortana or not. We're not going to turn it on for this customer just because I'm sure they don't care to have it. And then I usually like to turn all these options off, you know, privacy. I just don't. So just turn all those off and hit accept. And then it's going to go through the motion again. And I'm going to speed this up because you don't want to sit through this. It's very long. And of course, first thing it says, we need to do a major update to your computer. How about not now? So now that we've got it booted up, we're going to go over here to this PC, right click it and hit properties so that you can see what's in there. And you see that it is seeing our processor, Intel Core i5 8600K at 3.6 gigahertz, 16 gigs of memory. And I'm going to right click down here at the bottom and open Task Manager and go to Performance, right click and change the graph to where it shows all the logical processors. Now notice that we have 6 physical cores on there. That is a beautiful sight. So that means that we've got everything installed correctly. It works beautifully. We're ready to go. That is one heck of a processor. So now at this point, we're just going to reboot. And I just kind of want to show you how fast this thing boots up. This is in real time. This is not sped up at all. Was that even 5 seconds? Wow. I think this is the fastest computer I have built to date. So now we're going to run PC Mark and see how this thing handles. Now this part is obviously sped up because, again, you don't want to wait 30 minutes for it to run this test. But it just gives you an idea of normal workload on a computer and seeing kind of what it would handle, and gives you a score based on that. So here at the end, we see that PC Mark has given it a score of 4512, and that's actually very good for something like this. This is just built as a workstation, so it's a great machine. For essential workloads, given it 8950, for productivity 7487, and for digital content creation 3722. Now I'm sure that number would be higher if we had a dedicated graphics card. But this customer did not want a dedicated graphics card in there because he's not doing anything with digital content creation or what have you. Now I want to tell you something about this. I hope you're not planning on playing games with the integrated graphics in the Core i5 8600K. As you can see, it's pretty terrible, to say the least. I don't even think this is like 2 frames a second, maybe a frame and a half per second. But I would not recommend gaming with this particular build as it is. I would most certainly highly recommend putting some kind of graphics card in there, whether it be a GTX 1050 or a 1070. But I would not use integrated graphics for sure. It's just, it's awful. It is terrible. You might be able to play, World of Warcraft or something similar on that with no problem with this with integrated graphics, but anything like Battlefield 1 or, any modern games, especially in higher quality settings, good luck. Good luck. Now in Cinebench, totally different picture here. In OpenGL, it got 61.62 frames per second and the CPU score of 1025. That's not bad at all, that's pretty impressive. Well guys, that's a wrap for this video. If you stuck around for the whole thing, then I certainly appreciate you watching. I know this was a long video. Now listen, all the parts used in this build can be found in the video description below from Amazon if you want to build this exact computer or something similar. So be sure to check those out. Let me know what you thought of the video using the thumbs up and thumbs down buttons. And if you haven't already, consider subscribing and hitting that bell icon so that you know when I upload a new video. And as always, thanks for watching guys, and I'll see you in the next one.